Okay, wonderful. All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming this evening. We want to take a chance tonight to talk about potty training. We'll introduce ourselves. We know this is a hot topic for so many of our families. Ethan and I have done a lot of potty training with every kid I think we've probably worked with. It comes up a lot with our families. So we'll take tonight to kind of go through the basics of potty training, kind of some tips and tricks. And then definitely want to provide time at the end for any and all questions. We took a look at questions that were submitted before, and we've included some topics at the end based on those, but we of course are open to any and all questions that come up throughout tonight. And we'll kind of go from there. So intro to potty training and Q&A is our topic for this evening. We are recording, so you can always take a look at this later and we'll make sure that it's sent out. And so we'll kind of go through with introductions. So to start off, my name is Mady Schickler. I'm our Director of ABA Services. I've been with CST for about 7 years now as a BCBA, and I was a special education teacher before that. So excited to kind of get to know some of you a little more. Some of you I know already. And then I'm here with Ethan. Ethan, go for it. Oh, Ethan, I think you're frozen. Okay, well, hopefully he comes back.
Sorry, everyone. My internet cut out for a second there.
Perfect.
I'm Ethan Katz. I am one of our BCBAs at our...
Oh, I think he's gone again.
Mady?
Oh, now you're back.
Oh my goodness. Sorry about that, everyone.
You're good.
Internet problems. I'm Ethan Katz. I am one of our BCBAs at our Wilmette Clinic.
Awesome. All right, Ethan, I'll let you get started.
Yeah. So we wanted to start off with some potty training myths that I'm sure all of us have heard before. And there are a lot of things that aren't necessarily rooted in the science of potty training, but I feel like can be really stressful for parents. So we wanted to go through them. The first one, there's something wrong if your child is not potty trained by 18 months. As I'm sure you guys all know, everyone's kid meets different milestones at different rates, picks up different skills at different times. And I definitely would not put an 18-month limit on potty training. I think that for some families, it'll be quicker, and some families, it's a little bit more of a journey, but that's all specific to your child. We've all definitely heard this one. It's more difficult to potty train boys than it is girls. In my experience, boys or girls doesn't really matter. Once again, it's child by child, how ready they are, how quick they pick up that skill. You need to use special training pants. I'll tell you guys, I've never had parents buy special training pants for potty training. It's really not necessary, and it's not the reality they're going to live in once they are potty trained. So we might as well start preparing them for that. Children will always tell you when they need to use the potty. That is a skill just like every other skill, where it has to be taught, it has to be strengthened, and it has to be reinforced so that your child will tell you when they need to use the potty. Daycares and preschools provide potty training. In my experience, most of them do not, which is one reason why, kind of like Mady said, we've done a lot of potty trainings at our clinic, because a lot of times the outside services that these children receive do not do potty training. It's a bad sign if your child regresses with potty training. I think that skill regressions happen in all skills, potty training no different. And it's not a bad sign. It's just a sign that you might need to switch up the way you're teaching it or evaluate other factors surrounding potty training. But it definitely would not be something that would make me worry. Your child should be potty trained in a weekend. If that happens, that's amazing. That's wonderful. I hope all your children get potty trained in one weekend, because that's a great short period of time. The reality is, for some kids, it's a little bit more of a journey. And for some kids, it is that short period of time. in my experience, the way that I've figured out which are which is just by trying it, adjusting, and working at it. Having accidents will force your child to potty train. Accidents are a very, very important part of potty training. It's important information for the child, but it's not going to be what potty trains them for the most part. And the last one, forcing your child to sit on the potty will result in success in potty training. For those of you who we work with your children, I'm sure you've heard us say, we don't do any forced sitting, not at a desk, not at circle time, and definitely not on the potty. I say like half in jest, but your child's relationship with the toilet is one they're going to have their whole life. They're going to use it. They're going to be independent with it. And the very, very last thing we want is for them to be scared of the toilet, to hate the toilet, to not want to visit the toilet. So later we'll go through a couple ways to work on the skills for that. But for any child, if it feels like we're forcing them to sit on the potty, I would cut it and reevaluate the way we're teaching. Next, we have a potty training checklist. And for these skills, it's not that your child has to meet every single one of these for them to be able to be potty trained. The way I look at it is the more yeses you get, I think the slightly easier the journey is going to be. And the more no's you have, you just have to problem solve a little bit more. So the first one, is your child at least 2 years old, which directly contradicts the 18 months I mentioned in the myth section. I really wouldn't push potty training until you get to the 2-year mark. Your child just develops more body awareness, more control over themselves, and their language is going to start expanding a little bit more. Can your child follow simple directions? Come here, sit down, things like that. And since you all have kids, I'm sure you know, no child follows all directions. But the idea is, can they follow the directions? Do they understand what you're asking of them? Is your child able to concentrate for 5 minutes or more on an activity? I look at that across activities, not necessarily less preferred ones, schoolwork. I more so think about, can they play with a toy for 5 minutes? Can they read a book for 5 minutes? Does your child understand potty language? Do they know what wet means, what dry means, what poop means, and what pee means? Obviously, every family picks different language for all of these things, and that's all great, as long as we're being standard with it. But that's definitely going to be an advantage if your child understands the language we use around potty training. Does your child seem to recognize the urge to go before initiating urination or a bowel movement? Kids will show you in different ways that they're getting ready to go potty, even while they're still in their diaper. So it's going to be about watching your child and learning what is their potty language for that. Is your child able to withhold urine or stool, stays dry for 1.5 to 2 hours? A lot of times before I'll start potty training, we'll do what we call diaper checks, where once in a while we'll see how long a child's diaper stays dry, because the ability to hold it and go is a skill that we're going to be working on once we really start potty training. Does your child show an interest in potty training or the toilet? That's a great thing. If your child, already understands that you go in the potty or is interested in the potty. A lot of kids are interested in flushing before anything else, but any of those kind of interests can be helpful before you start. This is one too. Does your child dislike wet or dirty diapers? That kind of went back to the accident phase of it, but do they recognize when they're wet? Is that aversive for them? A lot of times that is a skill that kind of helps. Is your child able to pull elastic waistband? elastic waist pants or underwear up and down. Um, with potty training, the end goal is always independence with it. And the ability to pull up and pull down their pants to go potty is a very, very important skill. Does your child demonstrate imitative behavior? So, can they copy you when you're doing something? And the last one, and this is the hardest one, do you feel like your child is ready? A lot of times it feels so daunting, like, oh no, they're not ready, we're not ready. But parents being ready to go through it is a really, really important part of this. And especially going through this checklist, if you have more yeses than nos, your child might be ready.
All right. So once you get to that point where you feel like, all right, my child is ready, I'm ready to kind of take this on as a family because it is definitely a family commitment. There's some things to kind of jump into as you start to think through this. So first of all, you can find a million articles of like things to get when you want to get ready for potty training. There's clearly not one size fits all approach, but there are some things that can make it helpful. And if you're working with the BCBA, they will probably give you some tips and tricks on things that could help your child, which will also depend on what your child's interested in, what type of toilet you're using. So if you're going to use the normal adult toilet, some type of a potty seat insert is usually beneficial. Otherwise, sometimes their little bottoms can just slip right in, and that does not make for a positive start to potty training. It can be a little scary. A step stool, because just like Ethan said, we want to plan for independence from the beginning. So if we want, our kids to be able to get on the toilet, they have to be able to get on it on their own. Otherwise, they'll never be able to like walk themselves there and take themselves. So a step stool is usually really helpful for that. If you decide to use a mini toilet to get started, then that's fine too. They're both great options. The TV or lap tray is so that there's an area for your child to maybe play while they're sitting there. Sometimes this can be a little more cumbersome than helpful. So it's kind of up to you and what your child wants to be playing with, right? If they like a lot of little things, those can easily slip through their legs and then end up in the toilet. So it just kind of depends what they might have. Favorite toys and activities. As Ethan said, we want the toilet to be positive. Before you ever begin toilet training, and this is something, once again, your BCBA would go through with you, we want to make sure that your child wants to go into the bathroom, thinks the toilet is a fun place to sit and be. Otherwise, it isn't time to start because we don't want that to be a negative experience. So we want to make sure we have their favorite toys and activities ready to go. I mean, we've had bubble parties on the toilet, we play with figurines, we're crashing blocks. Like, if you can do it in another room, we can do it on the toilet. So that's a big component to get started. And then reinforcing items. So you would decide, and we'll talk about this more later, what you're going to use as like the ultimate reinforcer for actually going pee or going poop on the toilet. Extra clothes and cleanup supplies is huge. If you aren't ready for the mess, then you're not ready for potty training. Like, there will be accidents and it's going to be everywhere. So, just get ready for that spray you want to use, extra underwear, extra pants. If you're doing it home, you can just have them in underwear so you're not having to do excess laundry for all the pants. And then data sheets to track your child's progress. So clearly you're talking to BCBAs. We love data. So we're going to be talking about examples of ways to track that and how your BCBA would kind of help walk you through that data tracking so that we can make really systematic decisions about whether we should be moving forward or backwards and kind of how things are going. So reinforcement. So this often comes up as like, how is this not bribery? Like, what's the difference? So the reinforcement is chosen before the behavior occurs. So your child learns, all right, first I go pee on the potty, then I get, whether you want to use an item, a food item, whatever it is, but like something to really reward what they've done. The difference between that and bribery would be it's not like a consequence that's made up during it. Like, oh, come on, if you go, I'll give you X, Y, and Z. Like, it's not like that. It's set up beforehand. It's a contingency. It doesn't change. And it's only given after they successfully void on the toilet. And why do we do this, right? So this is for any child. This is not, specifically for autistic children, we use this, or specifically for neurotypical children. This is just how do we make it so that the potty and the toilet is something that like has value? And to do that, it's like, all right, well, there should be some perk of going to this new place and using it. So we are just trying to tie the behavior that we want to increase, which is peeing or pooping on the toilet, to something that's preferred. And over time, as always, the goal is to fade that. We don't want your kids or any kid getting to the point where they have to necessarily get whatever that reinforcer is as a result of going potty. But at first they do. And this is how most kids learn how to use the toilet, whether it's a sticker chart or, a little treat, it's typically tied to something to increase that value. So there are some reinforcement ideas below. And so it's kind of up to you and your family's preference. Some families don't want to use food. Some families say food's great because I can easily isolate it. They can always have, this fruit snack when they use the toilet, and otherwise I can not give them the fruit snack and it's not an issue. Sometimes people want to use a preferred activity, like a few minutes of a show or a video, or stickers are a really common one. I feel like stickers get used a lot because you can have favorite characters. They can stick them all over their face and your face, and everybody wins. So a lot of different reinforcement options there. All right, so usually, depending on the child, we might use a visual aid and we might not, depending on if that's kind of how they learn best, if that's something that they're going to really understand and be able to use. So if your child communicates best by maybe pointing to an icon, we might use the toilet icon that you see there as a way for them to be able to touch it, tap it, give it to us. We don't want to start potty training without some way for the child to tell us they have to go, because we are planning for independence from the beginning. If they don't have a way to tell us, whether, like I said, it's touching a picture, using their voice, using their device, then we're not at a place quite yet to be able to potty train. So that's what the visual is for. It's one way that kids can tell us if that's easiest. Some kids do really well with the first then board. They already know it. So first I use the toilet, then I get an M&M, or then I get, my Bluey video, whatever it is. And then some kids also do well with a task analysis, like you see on the right. So really kind of going through the steps. Some kids find a lot of comfort in like kind of walking through that with us, seeing what comes next, and knowing they've kind of completed the activity. So depending on your child and what works best for them, we're going to customize and partner with you to customize what type of visual aid could be beneficial, if any. Okay, so getting started. So in those days leading up to potty training, you're going to track your kids' elimination patterns. You're going to think through, when did those diaper changes occur? Was it wet or was it dirty? And taking note of any kind of signs that elimination's coming. So you're going to remove any rugs or things that are leading to the bathroom, because you just don't want to get to a place where you have too many things in the hallway or too many things that you don't want your child to be, maybe getting dirty if you don't have to. We oftentimes will push those liquids and salty foods to increase opportunities to use the toilet. If they've eaten a lot of salty foods, they might consume more liquids like pretzels or goldfish and things like that. So it puts everyone kind of in a good place to be able to have more chances to use it. You're going to set a timer potentially for time off the toilet if that's something that seems to be beneficial. We're going to look at some examples of schedules in a moment, but that's something that could be helpful if you want to have a certain amount of time off the toilet and on the toilet. And when it is time to go back to the bathroom, we are going to practice having your child be able to say, that they're ready to go. So whether it's using that visual aid that they're touching, maybe they're saying the word potty. We're just trying to find ways for them to self-initiate so that as we get way further down the line, they've practiced asking. So when they recognize that need to use the bathroom, they know how to say it and what to say. All right, so here's a couple procedures for how to kind of walk through time on the toilet and time off the toilet. So one option, and once again, this is one example plan. For every kid, it's super different. We just wanted to provide some examples of what it could look like. So while on the toilet, you might set a timer for how long the child is going to be on the toilet based on where they are on, a specific schedule. You're going to make that time really fun. So giving them items and books and songs. As much as we can, we want to make that toilet time super exciting and preferred. And then giving praise for that. So reminding them what that contingency is, like, oh, first we go potty, we go pee on the potty, then we earn whatever that might be. But just a lot of praise too for sitting there and playing with you while they're in the bathroom, because that might be new for them too. If they do start to go potty, they start to void, quietly praising that. We've had a lot of times where sometimes we get like really excited. For some kids that work, and if your child really loves that loud praise, then great. But some kids are immediately kind of startled by that and then might stop going. And then we've kind of like done the opposite of what we were looking for. So quietly praising that peeing on the toilet or pooping on the toilet. And then once they're done, giving the reinforcer with a lot of that praise. So awesome. I love how you pee on the potty, and immediately giving that reinforcer. So as soon as they're done, you're going to give that so that they understand this behavior resulted in this, thing that I really like. If there's too much of a gap in between, that connection is no longer there. And then we lose what we were reinforcing in the first place. It might seem like we're reinforcing getting off the toilet instead of that specific behavior of peeing or pooping on the potty. While they're off, if they did have success on the potty, then we might give a lot of that verbal praise and access to a highly preferred item, just to kind of continue to solidify how much you want to reinforce that behavior that they've done. If they pooped on the toilet, which is much harder for us to kind of like get the right timing for and make sure that we're capturing, then we might provide a little bit of additional time with a preferred item, just to kind of provide that reinforcer a little bit stronger. If while they're off the toilet, they start to have an accident, this is when we get questions on a lot. We're going to immediately help them get to the toilet. The goal is that they finish having that void while they're on the toilet so that we can quickly remove those underwear and finish while they're on the potty. We're going to still reinforce it if they finish at all in the toilet, because accidents are going to happen. This is a totally new skill. So we just want to see if we can catch any of it. If they don't do any in the toilet, we'll just neutrally help them change their clothes and return to what we were doing. It's not getting punished. Nothing's happening like that. But they're not going to get the reinforcer because that didn't happen. That void didn't happen while they were actually sitting on the toilet. All right, so here we have an example of the interval schedule, and kind of like I noted before, this is an intensive one. So this is one that we might use if we're really doing kind of a full weekend or a full couple days where we want to really go intensive on the potty training route. Oftentimes this is followed from before practicing, like the toilet's a great place to be. We really like it so that the child's able to sit for this amount of time. So we might have them sit for 10 or 15 minutes on the toilet. Once again, we are playing, we're doing bubbles, we're playing with toys and reading books. They're not just like sitting there in a bathroom, quietly. And then off the toilet, it's very short. And the reason for this is because we're just trying to catch success. After a couple successes, we're going to quickly move up so that they're spending a lot less time on the toilet. But the entire purpose of an intensive schedule like this is to catch success. If we can catch success early and often, the child learns, oh, this is the behavior that we're trying to work on. This is the consequence. I'm starting to understand. The feeling is clicking, and then we can move up faster. And you can see by step 7, we're only on the toilet for 3 minutes and we're off for 45. So we can get through these intervals, in a day, in a few days. It kind of just depends on how the child adapts and how we're able to kind of put time into potty training across everyone that's in the child's life. All right, and this is kind of what we talked about before. So the criteria for moving on really depends on the child, but one common one is moving to the next phase after 3 consecutive successes. So 3 in a row would mean that we move to the next interval or more time off the toilet. But if we have 2 consecutive accidents, we might move back and spend a little more time on the toilet and a little less time off. If it's back and forth, then we might just kind of keep going and hope to catch more of those successes until we see a consistent pattern in one direction or another. But we do expect to see accidents. That's part of it. We're going to see accidents for a while, even after a child's potty trained. It's just part of development. All right, so data tracking. This is one example of a data tracking sheet that BCBAs might use or share with you. There's also a variety of other kinds that can be used. This is just one example. Therapists can use this at the clinic, families and caregivers can use this at home. It helps us have all adults on the same page about when it's time to move forward or backwards on a potty training schedule. So typically each time the child goes to the toilet, we just circle whether they're having a success, they had an accident. Accident success means that they started with an accident and we were able to get them to the toilet to finish. No success means they didn't engage in either during that scheduled sit, and an independent request, which typically comes much later. So don't worry if you're wondering, how do I get my child to ask to go? That comes much later. But we would note if that did happen because we want to make sure that we're noting if that's becoming something that the child's able to do. So using a data sheet like this, it's really easy to show, oh, we've had 3 successes in a row. I'm ready to move up to the next interval. Or we've had 2 accidents in a row. We're going to move back 1 just to really solidify what the expectation is here. So it just clears things up so that everyone can kind of progress at the same rate. All right, so top potty training tips. So first of all, I would definitely recommend picking a weekend to dedicate to this. It's really hard if you have a lot of plans going on and you're trying to take your child to the bathroom super frequently. It makes it hard to really do anything else. If you can commit a whole weekend to do a schedule like that intensive one a few slides back, you're going to be set up for success by getting your child further along faster than if it's kind of inconsistent at the beginning. It will still happen. It will just take a little bit longer. One that typically scares families is that we recommend, other than sleeping or in the car when you might put a diaper or pull up over their underwear, they're going to be in underwear as soon as we start potty training. We want to make sure they start to understand, like, now if I feel wet or if I'm wet, I'm going to feel it, versus before with that diaper, it's not the same sensation for them. So once again, sleeping, definitely continue the diaper and pull up. But if you're just going about your day, they're at home, they're with us at therapy, we're going to continue potty training using underwear. Make sure you buy plenty of underwear. Usually it helps if you can include like their favorite characters. They're really excited to put on their Bluey underwear or their Elmo underwear. It makes it a lot more exciting than just like white underwear that all of a sudden is boring and not so cool. Picking the potty or potty seat, you want to make sure you have those materials that you're ready to start. And decide your strategy. So, are you going to do the really intensive schedule? Are you going to stay by the toilet during those times off so that you can quickly, kind of help them onto the toilet if they start having an accident? What is the schedule that everyone's going to use? But as much as you're set up for success, your child will be too. So really take the time to plan ahead and work with your BCBA to do that as well. And then decide on that reinforcer. It needs to be only for the toilet. So if they know that they can get M&Ms also after dinner, it's not so motivating to pee on the potty because I'll just wait and get my M&Ms later tonight. But if that's the only time that the child's getting something that they really, really like, it makes it much more motivating to do that behavior and to use the bathroom. All right, a few things to avoid. So not going back to diapers or pull-ups. Now there's exceptions for all these, of course, right? None of this is like a super never ever. But really trying, once you commit to underwear, really trying not to like put them in a diaper for the afternoon. Once again, if they're napping or sleeping, that's different. But when they're awake, we want them to really learn what it feels like to be dry, what it feels like to be wet. Don't expect your child to initiate using the potty at first. That is a later skill. We don't expect that at the beginning. We're not asking every couple minutes, do you have to go potty? Do you need to use the potty? They don't know what that means yet, and that's okay. But if we're asking those things, it just gets a little bit confusing. So wait for that initiation until they're ready to practice that skill, which is something that your BCBA can kind of help you with, or other therapists that your child's working with. Try not to get frustrated by accidents. I know that it's messy and it's hard and, maybe it can be a little bit difficult when they're happening frequently, but it is part of the process and it's just part of kids being young. It's going to take some time. And definitely don't stop using reinforcement too fast. Sometimes families will be like, we had all these successes, so we stopped using the reinforcer, and I don't know why we're having accidents again. Now, yes, our goal is to stop using the reinforcer for sure, but if we do it too fast, that skill might go away for a little bit because it's like, oh, well, I kind of forget why I like doing this or why it mattered. But if we've really solidified the skill, then the risk of getting rid of that reinforcer, decreases. So we just want to make sure we give it time before we are fading it out. And we would do a fade so that it's not all of a sudden we get it and then we don't. And similarly, not changing the schedule too soon. So if you are being consistent, taking them at similar times, kind of working through a schedule, and then you change it all of a sudden, that's going to be really hard for your child to adjust to. So just make sure that, if you are going to grandma's house or somewhere else, you're still staying on that schedule. You're keeping it consistent. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to make progress if things feel really different all the time for the child. All right, so last we have some troubleshooting tips of things that have come up, and we included the couple questions that you all added to our Google form onto this section, and then we'll go through questions. So the first problem that oftentimes comes up is the child doesn't want to sit on the potty. So our number one tip for this is bringing highly preferred items to that location. Also, not starting potty training until they do want to sit on the potty. So if you're seeing that it's really aversive right now, then the first step is just to make it fun before you actually try to work on voiding on the toilet. So really pairing the bathroom with things that are highly reinforcing. If they don't care about the reinforcer, it means it's the wrong one. It's not a reinforcer if they don't care about it or if it's not working. So sometimes kids can provide that, choice. If you give options for what they want to get for going on the toilet, then they can pick, or might mean doing something where we kind of try different things and see what the child gravitates to, and then we use that. But if you're potty training for a number of days, a number of weeks, and you use the same thing the whole time, you might see that the child's like, all right, I'm really over whatever it was that you picked at the beginning. So change it up, check in to see what they're motivated for, and provide options where you can. After moving through the full interval schedule, they're not initiating going potty. That's okay. That's pretty common actually. So what we do is we kind of give it some time, get through that full interval schedule. Potty training is solid when they're being taken on a schedule. Then when we talked about the fading of reinforcement, what we oftentimes do is reserve that reinforcement for initiation. So that's kind of a later step in potty training, but we get to the point where then when they ask to go potty, then they get the reinforcer. And you're probably thinking, well, won't they ask all the time to get it? Yes, that's okay. That happens for a bit. They ask all the time, they keep getting it, but then they learn to go, and then we fade that too. So then maybe they earn the reinforcer once they ask and successfully void. So it's all kind of a fading process, but we learn or we teach the kids that, oh, I can actually ask if I have to go, but it just takes some time. They keep having accidents. Well, track the time between accidents. We might need to adjust the schedule. We might need to go more frequently. For some kids, they don't notice if they have an accident. Maybe they don't mind being wet. Not all those things on that potty training readiness checklist applies to every kid, and that's okay. Some kids do really well with the potty alarm. It's like a wet alarm that if they have an accident, it might make a sound to alert them, and then they can, know, oh, I go to the bathroom, like this is what it feels like when I have an accident. There's a lot of different things like that that we can use if needed, or if it's something that the family wants to. These are all things that, you would decide for your own child. You could talk to your BCBA about if that's someone that you work with. But really it comes down to tracking how often they're happening and figuring out how we need to adjust our schedule or change our reinforcer to make going to the bathroom more successful. They're still wetting the bed at night. So this one is common because nighttime toilet training comes later. This is not until your child is developmentally ready to actually hold their bladder through the night. We usually don't see this until they're like 6 or onward. We see kids still having accidents, sometimes up until, 8 or 10, like that. This is just kind of a different journey to be able to hold your bladder the entire night. At a young age. So there's a few things that you can try if your child is at the point where their doctor is saying, okay, developmentally, you can expect them to hold it the whole night. Things before going to bed, for example, limiting liquid intake a certain amount of time before bed. Also those salty foods, limiting those a certain amount of time before bed. You also could do nighttime wakings. Sometimes families will, really quietly, calmly, like wake their child during the night, take them to the bathroom, take them back to bed so they get to empty their bladder during the night if maybe it's hard to hold. Or doing some type of a morning reinforcer. So staying dry the whole night equals something special in the morning. So there's a variety of tactics you can use if this is something that's happening and you're ready to tackle. But once again, this is a later step. So, don't be discouraged if this is something that you're struggling with for a while. That's pretty typical, and diapers and pull-ups during the night is very normal. All right, and the last two are they won't have a bowel movement on the potty. So remember, this one too takes time. We definitely see urine voiding successes much sooner than BMs. Adding fiber-rich food can help if the doctor says that that's appropriate. Once again, with BM training, please consult with your doctor if there's like any concerns there, if there's any issues with regularity. But typically we see increased reinforcers for BMs or adding in something new and special because that can be scary for kids. It's a new feeling. It's scary to do on the toilet. They're not used to it. So typically some extra encouragement and motivation can help. Modeling those steps, kind of showing what it feels like, doing the squeezing. Sometimes kids will like watch little, videos that are made for kids learning to potty train, with some, those models of kind of what it looks like to sit on the toilet and like prepare for that. If they do have, whether it's an accident of a BM in their pull-up or that's just typical, showing them to kind of dump in the toilet. I know it sounds kind of gross, but just the concept of like, this is where it goes, and then maybe you could flush it together. And then if you are working with the BCBA, talking to them about other ways to shape this behavior. This one can just be a little bit more complex. Looking for those precursor behaviors, whether maybe they go under the table or they go to a corner for privacy, could be a great cue of like, let's go to the potty. But just getting ahead of it is typically your best bet. Sometimes easier said than done though. And last, like Ethan said, they're potty training, but they've regressed. First of all, consider other variables. So maybe there's been a change at home. Maybe there's been a change, in their day-to-day schedule. Like, is there anything maybe that's happened that could lead to that? If you can't pinpoint something there, then just go back to the basics. You might need to check, is the reinforcer working? Was it faded too quickly? Are you past using a reinforcer and do we need to introduce it again? Do we need to go back onto a schedule? Sometimes we can get like really confident, oh, they're going on a schedule. I think I can wait for them to ask. Well, with the kids that, age range that we work with, kids that age are taken to the bathroom on schedule. So make sure that you're still doing that, and you're providing those opportunities to go at specific times. But they've learned this once at that point. So it's okay to kind of go back to those basics and figure out where might the problem lie and go at it from that. And the BCBA, once again, can help you problem solve this as well, if something comes up here.